The British conquest of India and the establishment of their rule was a complex process that spanned several centuries, involving military force, political maneuvering, economic exploitation, and cultural influence. Here's a brief history of how the British Empire came to rule India. Early European interest and East India Company, arrival of Europeans, 1498. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer, reached Calcutta on the southwestern coast of India, marking the beginning of European interest in Indian trade. 16th and 17th centuries, the Portuguese were followed by the Dutch, the French, and the British, all seeking to establish their own trading posts and colonies in India. Formation of the East India Company, 1600. The British East India Company was established by royal charter by Queen Elizabeth I. It aimed to capitalize on the lucrative spice trade with the East Indies, including India. Expansion through trade and military might. Establishment of trading posts. Early 17th century, the East India Company established its first trading post in Surat in 1612. Over time, it established more posts in Madras, Chennai, Bombay, Mumbai, and Calcutta, Kolkata. Battle of Plassey, 1757. The Battle of Plassey was a decisive victory for the British East India Company under Robert Clive. The battle marked the beginning of British political control in India. The victory allowed the company to install a puppet ruler in Bengal, gaining control over its revenues. Treaty of Allahabad, 1765. Following the Battle of Buxar, 1764, the Treaty of Allahabad granted the East India Company the Diwani, or the right to collect revenue, in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This provided the company with substantial economic power and marked the start of formal British rule in India. Expansion of British control subsidiary alliances, late 18th century. The British used a system of subsidiary alliances, under which Indian princes were forced to accept British troops in their territories and pay for their maintenance. This eroded the sovereignty of many Indian states. Annexation and doctrine of lapse. 19th century. The British pursued a policy of annexation through the doctrine of lapse, where they annexed states with no direct male heir, claiming them as British territory. States like Satara, 1848, Sambalpur, 1849, and Jhansi, 1853, were annexed in this manner. The Revolt of 1857 and transition to Crown rule, the Indian Rebellion of 1857-1857, a major but ultimately unsuccessful rebellion against British rule broke out. It is also known as the First War of Indian Independence, or the Sepoy Mutiny. The revolt was a reaction to economic exploitation, political disenfranchisement, and cultural insensitivity by the British. End of company rule, 1858. In response to the rebellion, the British Crown dissolved the East India Company and assumed direct control over India. The Government of India Act, 1858, marked the beginning of the British Raj, with a viceroy appointed to represent the British monarch. British Raj, 1858 to 1947. Economic exploitation. The British restructured India's economy to serve British interests, leading to the decline of traditional industries and the growth of a cash crop economy. This caused widespread poverty and famines. Social and cultural changes. The British introduced Western education, legal systems, and infrastructure. While these changes modernized certain aspects of Indian society, they also disrupted traditional ways of life and fueled resentment among Indians. Nationalist movements and independence. Rise of nationalism. Late 19th century, Indian nationalism began to grow, with the formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885, which became a platform for voicing grievances and demanding greater self-governance. Independence movement, 20th century. The struggle for independence intensified, with significant contributions from leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Subhas Chandra Bose. Gandhi's non-violent civil disobedience movement played a crucial role in mobilizing the masses. Independence and partition. 1947. After prolonged negotiations and growing unrest, India gained independence from British rule on August 15, 1947. The country was partitioned into two independent dominions, India and Pakistan, leading to large-scale migration and violence. Conclusion. The British Empire's conquest and rule over India were marked by a combination of military conquest, strategic alliances, economic exploitation, and cultural dominance. The legacy of British rule in India is complex, with both positive and negative impacts that continue to influence the country to this day. The British rule in India, spanning from the early 17th century until 1947, was marked by a series of events that led to the establishment, consolidation, and eventual dissolution of British control over the Indian subcontinent. Here is a brief history of British rule in India. Early presence in the East India Company. Arrival and establishment, 1600. The British East India Company was chartered by Queen Elizabeth I to trade in the East Indies. It quickly set its sights on India due to the lucrative spice and textile markets. 1612. The company established its first trading post in Surat, followed by Madras, 1639, Bombay, 1668, and Calcutta, 1690. These trading posts eventually grew into major centers of British power. Expansion and conquest. Battle of Plassey, 1757. The Battle of Plassey marked a significant turning point, where the British, led by Robert Clive, defeated the Nawab of Bengal. This victory allowed the company to gain political and military control over Bengal, a key economic region. Treaty of Allahabad, 1765. After the Battle of Buxar in 1764, the Treaty of Allahabad granted the East India Company the right to collect revenue, Diwani, in Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. This effectively made the company the de facto ruler of these regions. Establishing control and governance expansion through diplomacy and warfare, late 18th to early 19th centuries. The British used a combination of military force and diplomatic strategies, such as the subsidiary alliance system, to expand their control. States that entered these alliances effectively lost their sovereignty to the British. Doctrine of Lapse, mid-19th century. The doctrine of lapse allowed the British to annex Indian states without a clear heir, further expanding their territory. States like Satara, 1848, Jhansi, 1853, and Awadh, 1856, were annexed under this policy. The Revolt of 1857 and its aftermath. The Indian Rebellion of 1857. The First War of Indian Independence, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, was a major uprising against British rule. Triggered by grievances among Indian soldiers, sepoys, and widespread discontent, it threatened British control but was eventually suppressed. End of East India Company rule, 1858. In response to the rebellion, the British government took direct control of India from the East India Company through the Government of India Act, 1858. This marked the beginning of the British Raj, with a viceroy representing the British Crown. British Raj, 1858 to 1947, economic and social impact. The British introduced various reforms, including Western education, legal systems, and infrastructure development, such as railways and telegraphs. However, economic policies primarily benefited Britain, leading to the deindustrialization of India and causing famines and poverty. Nationalist movements. Late 19th to early 20th centuries, Indian nationalism began to grow, with the formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi, and Jawaharlal Nehru played significant roles in the independence movement. Road to Independence. Civil disobedience and reforms, 1920s to 1940s. Gandhi's non-violent civil disobedience movements, such as the Salt March in 1930, galvanized public support for independence. The Quit India movement, in 1942, further intensified the struggle against British rule. World War II and post-war period. The economic strain of World War II weakened British resolve and capacity to maintain control over India. Additionally, increasing communal tensions and the demand for an independent Pakistan led to mounting pressure for British withdrawal. Independence and Partition. Independence Act and Partition, 1947. The Indian Independence Act was passed by the British Parliament leading to the partition of British India into two independent dominions, India and Pakistan, on August 15, 1947. The partition resulted in massive migration and violence along religious lines. Conclusion: British rule in India was characterized by significant changes in governance, economy, and society. While the British introduced modernization in various sectors, their exploitative economic policies and racial discrimination led to widespread discontent and eventually fueled the independence movement. The legacy of British rule continues to influence India's political, social, and economic landscape.